Hello everybody and welcome to Independent Art Story Time. This is chapter 4, part 2 of the Box of Delights, and Kay and Peter have just seen the old man be scrobbled and been to report it to the bloodhounds of the law. They're just about to head back to Sea King's for breakfast, believing that Cole Hawlings is safe. Just before they clambered over the garden fence of Sea King's, a puff of air came upon Kay's face, which made him look up at the sky. It had been a bright, clearing weather at dawn, but now it was clouding over from the west on a muggy, windless air. A weeping thaw had set in. As he entered the house there came a slip and splosh of snow dropping far from the roofs. "There's a thaw," he said. "We shan't get very far with that snowman we were going to build." Before he went to breakfast, Kay tried to telephone Caroline Louisa to ask how her brother was. Unfortunately, the line was out of order owing to the snow. They said that the men were doing their best but couldn't promise anything, and they hoped to have the line up and running again during the day. The post had not come, however that was due to Christmas, not the snow. All through breakfast snow fell from roofs and trees, slither, slither, splosh. When they went into the field to set about their snowman, they found the snow was rapidly becoming too sloshy, and they were working in slush. "We better stop," Jemima said. "We should be wet through, and he'd never look up to much." "Well, we'll give him a sort of head," Kay said, and this they did, and Maria topped it with an old top hat that had lost its crown. Susan put in some dark stones for the eyes, and Peter added a clay pipe. Then they flung some sploshy snowballs at him. Ellen called to them from the door. "If you please," she said, "you are not to get wet through." "Oh, by the way, Ellen," Kay said, "have you had any telephone messages?" "No, the telephone isn't working," Ellen said. "Are they doing their best?" Peter called. "Oh, Miss Susan," Ellen said, "you are naughty to go and get yourself all wet through like this. And you, Miss Jemima. Miss Maria, your things'll be ruined." "Jolly good job," Maria said. "No, Miss Maria," Ellen said, "it isn't a good job, and you know that it isn't, and you ought not to say such things. To be wet through in the cold is the way to take your death. Now come along now, like a good girl. Come along in. No nonsense, you must change all your things." And she shepherded the girls to the door, and then remembered the boys. "And you, Master Kay, you're wet through too," she said. "Oh, come on, Peter," Kay said. "Let's get out of this. There's way too much discipline here altogether." They slipped over the fence, in spite of Ellen's calls. "What shall we do now?" Peter asked. "Shall we go out again to Arthur's camp?" "But we've been there once this morning." "I know, but I can't help but think we've not heard the last of that aeroplane. And I can't help thinking we shall find out some more, or hear some more, if we go out. And we might try tracking the foxes down. It's only a mile." "Well, all right," Peter said. Though the thaw was now streaming, they found their own tracks and those of the little old man, and besides these there were the tracks of 2 other men. "You see, 2 men have been along here since we were here," Kay said, "and they're not countrymen, for they don't wear nail boots." "One of them was smoking a cigarette," Peter said. "See the ash, and there's a cigarette butt. Egyptian." "What on earth have they been doing here, sweeping the snow aside?" Kay said. "I wonder why they've done that." "Oh," Peter said, "these bird enthusiasts are always doing things like that to let the birds get at the worms." "That's a bright idea," Kay said. They went on, noticing that here and there the snow had been carefully swept aside. As they were now trackers on a trail, they went cautiously. When they came in sight of the spot where the old man had been set upon, they saw 2 men sweeping the snow with a sort of hard hand brush. "Keep under cover, Peter," Kay said. "There are your bird enthusiasts. The plot thickens. I see it all. They scrobbled that old man, thinking that he got something which they wanted. They released the old man when they found he hadn't got it, and now they think he's dropped it in the snow, and that's what they're looking for. They won't find it in this slush, I'll bet. What do you make of the 2 men?" "They look like curates to me," Peter said. "They're the two who were in the train with me yesterday, and I've a very shrewd suspicion that they picked my pockets." "You think that the curate's clothes are a disguise?" "Yes." "Golly," Peter said. "Well, let's watch." Presently the two men wearied of their search and decided that it was no good searching longer, and they went off down the hill. With some little trouble the boys followed, unobserved, as they hoped. The two curates went downhill to the road, where a big, dark, shabby car was waiting for them. They got into the car and drove off. As they went, Kay noticed in a northwesterly direction. Presently, as he chanced to look in that direction, he saw some bright moving speck in the sky, which he judged to be an aeroplane. "I wonder," he thought to himself, "if that motor car could turn into an aeroplane." "I wonder what it was," Peter said. "I wonder what the men were hoping to find." Kay knew very well what they were hoping to find, but he didn't feel he had the right to say. "Oh, these gangs," he said airily, "they're always trying to get each other's codes and passwords." "I shouldn't think they'd bother about those," Peter said. "They could always torture a prisoner till he told them the passwords. I should think they were rival gangs of jewel thieves after the same diamond necklace, and one of the gangs has got it and is trying to get it out of the country, and the other gang is trying to waylay it." "That's an idea," Kay said. He was afraid that that might be the explanation. "When I get in," he thought, "I will hide and look at this box. If it is a diamond necklace, I shall take it straight to the police inspector." And they went home. Now at last Kay felt he was free to look at the box of delights. He went up to his bedroom. He was very anxious not to be spied upon, and remembering how those 3 spies had been peering in at the window the night before, and how repulsive Rat had crept about in the secret passages finding out all sorts of things, he was not sure that he could guard himself from being seen. His bedroom had 2 doors in it opening onto different landings. He locked both doors and hung caps over the keyholes. He drew down the window blinds and pulled the curtains. He looked under the beds, and then, as in the past when he had wished to hide from his governess, he crept under the valance of his dressing table. Nobody could possibly see him there. The box was of some very hard wood of dense grain. It had been covered with shagreen, but the shagreen was black with age and sometimes worn away as to show the wood beneath. Both wood and shagreen had been polished until they were smooth as polished metal. On the side of it was a little countersunk groove, in the midst of which was a knob. "I press this to open," he repeated. "If I push it to the right, I can go small, whatever that may mean. If I push it to the left, I can go swift, and that I've tried. I do want to see what's inside. I wonder, is this wood that it's made of something special?" "It's the wood that the phoenix builds in," the box said. "Is it really?" Kay said. "No wonder it smells like spice." Then he saw that the groove was inlaid with gold, and that the golden knob within the groove had been carven into the image of a rosebud, which was extraordinarily fragrant. "I say," Kay said to himself, "this is a wonderful box, and now I shall open it." He pressed the tiny golden rosebud, and at once from within the box there came a tiny crying of birds. As he listened, he heard the stock-dove brooding, the cuckoo tolling, blackbirds, thrushes, and the nightingale singing, and then a far-away cock crowed thrice, and the box slowly opened. Inside he saw what he took to be a book, the leaves of which were all chased and worked with multitudinous figures, and the effect that it gave him was that of staring into an opening in the wood. It was lit from within, and multitudinous tiny things were shifting there. Then he saw that the things which were falling were the petals of May blossom from a giant hawthorn tree covered with flowers. The hawthorns stood on each side of the entrance to the forest, which was dark from the great trees and yet dappled with light. Now, as he looked into it, he saw a deer glide with alert ears, then a fox, motionless at his earth, a rabbit moving on to new pasture and nibbling at a dandelion, and the snouts of the moles breaking the wet earth. All the forest was full of life. All the birds were singing, insects were humming, dragonflies darting, butterflies wavering and settling. It was so clear that he could see the flies on the leaves brushing their heads and wings with their legs. It's all alive and it's full of summer. There are birds singing. There's a linnet and a bullfinch, a robin and a little wren. Others were singing too. Different kinds of tits. The woodpecker was drilling, the chiff-chaff repeating its name. The yellow hammer and the garden warbler were singing, and overhead, as the birds went swiftly past, came the sad, laughing cry of the curlew. While he gazed into the heart of summer and listened to the murmur and the singing, he heard another noise, like the tinkling of little bells. He wondered what these bells could be, and decided they were not bells, but a tinkling like the cry of many long-tailed tits together. "Where did I hear that noise somewhere before recently?" Kay said to himself. It was not the noise of long-tailed tits, it was the noise of little chains clinking, and he remembered the strange rider who had passed him in the street before. That rider, who seemed to have little silver chains dangling from his wrists, had jingled so. "Oh," Kay said as he looked, "there's someone wonderful coming." At first he thought that the figure was one of those giant red deer long since extinct, and it bore enormous antlers. And then he saw it was a great man, antlered at the brow, dressed in deerskin, and moving with the silent, slow grace of a stag, and although he was so like a stag, he was hung about with little silver chains and bells. Kay knew at once that this was Herne the hunter, of whom he had often heard. "Ha, Kay!" Herne the hunter said. "Are you coming into my wild wood?" "Yes, if you please, sir," Kay said, and Herne stretched out his hand. Kay took it, and at once he was glad that he'd taken it, for there he was in the forest between the two hawthorn trees, with the petals of the may blossom falling upon him. All the may blossoms that fell were talking to him, and he was aware of what all the creatures of the forest were saying to each other, of what the birds were singing, and what it was that the flowers and trees were thinking. And he realized that the forest went on and on forever, and all of it was full of life beyond anything he had ever imagined. For in the trees, in each leaf, and on every twig and in every inch of soil, there were ants and grubs and worms, little tiny moving things, incredibly small, yet all thrilling with life. "Oh dear," Kay said, "I shall never know 100th part of all the things there are to know." "You will if you stay with me," Herne the hunter said. "Would you like to be a stag with me in the wild wood?" Now, next to being a jockey, Kay had longed to be a young stag, and now he realized that he had become one. He was there in the green wood beside a giant stag, so screened with the boughs that they were part of the dappled pattern of light and shade, and the news of the wood came to him in scents upon the wind. Presently the giant stag gave a signal, and they moved off out of the wood into a rolling grassland where some fox cubs were playing with a vixen. They passed these and presently came down to a pool where some moorhens were cocking about in the water. A crested grebe kept a fierce eye upon them. They went out into the water. It was lovely, Kay thought, to feel the water cool upon the feet after running, and to be able to go paddling, although it had been winter only a moment before. And it's lovely too, he thought, to have hard feet and not get sharp bits of twig into one's soles. They moved through the water towards some reeds Looking through the stalks of the reeds, Kay saw that there were a multitude of wild duck. "Would you like to be a wild duck, Kay?" Herne asked. Now, next to being a jockey and a stag, Kay had longed to be a wild duck, and at once, with a clatter of feathers, the wild duck rose more and more and more, going high up, and oh joy! Herne and Kay were with them, flying on wings of their own, and Kay could just see that his neck was glinting green. There was the pool, blue as a piece of sky below them, and the sky above brighter than he had ever seen. They flew higher and higher, in great sweeps, and presently they saw the sea like a dark blue of a map. Then they made a circling sweep, and there was a pool once more, blue like the sky. "Now for the plunge!" Herne cried, and instantly they were surging down swiftly and still more swiftly, and the pool was rushing up at them, and they all went skimming into it with long, scuttling, rippling splash. And there they were, paddling together, happy to be in the water again. "How beautiful the water is," Kay said. Indeed it was beautiful, clear hill water, with little fish darting this way and that, and the weeds waving, and sometimes he saw that the waving weeds were really fish. "Would you like to be a fish, Kay?" Herne asked. And next to being a jockey, a stag and a wild duck, Kay had always longed to be a fish. And then instantly Kay was a fish, and he and Herne were there in the coolness and dimness, wavering as the water wavered, and feeling a cold spring gurgling up just beneath them and tickling their tummies. While Kay was enjoying the water, Herne asked, "Did you see the wolves in the wood?" "No," Kay said. "Well, they were there," Herne said, "and that's why I moved. Did you see the hawks in the air?" "No," Kay said. "Well, they were there," Herne said, "and that's why I plunged. Did you see the pike in the weeds?" "No," Kay said. "He is there," Herne said. "Look." Looking up ahead, upstream, Kay saw a darkness of weeds wavering in the water, and presently a part of the darkness wavered into the shape, with eyes that gleamed and hooky teeth that showed. Kay saw that the eyes were fixed upon himself, and suddenly the dark shadow leapt swiftly forward with a swirl of water. But Kay and Herne were out of the water. They were trotting happily together over the grass towards the forest. Herne, a giant figure with the antlers of the red stag, and himself a little figure with little budding antlers. And so they went trotting together into the forest to a great, great ruined oak tree, so that all within was hollow, and the great shell still put forth twigs and leaves. Somehow the figure of Herne, which had been so stag-like, became like the old oak tree, and merged into the oak tree, until Kay could see nothing but the tree. What had been Herne's antlers were now a few old branches, and what had seemed like silver chains dangling from Herne's wrists were now the leaves rustling. Then the old oak tree faded and grew smaller, till it was a dark point in a sunny glade. And the glade shrank, and there was Kay standing between the two hawthorn trees which were shedding their blossoms upon him. Then these shrank until they were as tiny as the works of a watch, and then Kay was himself again, under the valance in his room at Seekings, looking at the first page in the Book of Delights contained within the box. "My goodness," Kay said. "No wonder the old man treasured this box and called it the Box of Delights. Now I wonder," he said, "how long have I been in that fairyland with Herne the Hunter?" And he looked at his watch and found that he'd only been away for 2 minutes. It was now 10 minutes to 11. "My goodness," Kay said, "all that took only 2 minutes." I hope you've enjoyed the story so far, and we'll be back with you to read chapter 5 very soon.